provided in the packet was posted.
Okay, roll call.
Lance Smith.
Rick Walters.
Ryan White.
William McBride.
Charles Renz.
Kevin Cool.
Item 2, approval of minutes. Looks like there are none.
Correct.
To approve. New business.
Item 3, new business.
We're here today to consider a request from Mark Augustine for amendments to the 2012 International Building Code and 2012 International Fire Code regarding the automatic sprinkler system requirements for self-service storage facilities. And the request is related to sections 903.2.9, 903.2.9.1, and 903.2.9.5 of both the IBC and IFC. For Chapter 9, those books have the same text, and so the section numbers are identical. Also, to talk about IFC interpretation 20-14, and finally, Salina Municipal Code Section 8-1-903.2.9.3. Now, what I would like to do in opening is allow Mr. Augustine, if he wishes to address the board to talk about his proposed amendment and the reasons for it, which you should have in text form in front of you. It was a part of the packet. And then when Mr. Augustine has finished, if he wishes to speak, then I also will provide a little bit of a summary of the situation and ultimately provide options for board action after discussion has taken place. So, Mr. Augustine, do you wish to speak?
Hi, Mark Augustine, 148 Mount Barbara. First, I'd like to thank you for coming today for this special meeting. I know everybody's busy, and city staff and I try to resolve this through the 2018 building code adoption process, but just running out of time on the construction side. So, again, thank you for coming today. So, why are we here today? Well, I'm here today because, as you all know, to get a building permit, you got to get your plans put together, you got to order the buildings, and they're designed, and you make some assumptions. And one of the assumptions I made was that I knew from my previous projects in the city of Salina on self-storage that there was a requirement to 7,500 square feet, which is different than the code book, because the code book calls for 12,000 square feet when a sprinkler system is required. But the city years ago on other projects that I worked on reduced that to 7,500 square feet. So I called city staff and asked if that code was still in effect, and the answer was yes. I passed that on to the design team, and they moved forward with that. And so the building that is in question is the building that is 13,500 square feet. That's a climate-controlled storage facility, and it's 13,500 square feet for a reason. It's optimized the hallways and the unit sizes so I didn't have any wasted space. Otherwise, it would have been 15,000 square feet. So each side, the way it's designed today, has a fire barrier wall down the middle, which leaves 6,750 square feet on either side. That's the way it's designed today. But after we went through the design process, ordered all the buildings, of course, you submit for your building permit. That's when this nugget was found in the 2012 code that upholstery furniture and mattresses are an issue in S1 occupancy if it's above 2,500 square feet, which triggers the automatic sprinkler system in the 2012 code, as I understand it. So that's why we're here today, I guess, is that some assumptions were made in the design process based off of that 7,500 square feet. But the code got a little stricter between my last project and this one that I'm working on out at 3730 South 9th. So some reasons I think the current design is safe. We have a very low occupancy. Current entries today, which I can show you proof, I pulled it off our log, is the highest entry on any given day is 9 people entering my current climate facility. and very few times is there more than one person in that building at a time. So the risk to human life is very low because it's a very low occupancy. I also, when I learned of this and when I got my letter of conditions from the city of Salina, I went out and audited those storage units, and all those have just chicken wire on the top, so all I had to do is go around and look at my 83 units out there and found a very low use for people storing mattresses and upholstery furniture. I found 2 mattresses and 1 recliner in 83 units. So I can't tell you why people aren't storing furniture, but they're not in the climate-controlled facility. Another reason I think it's safe is the current building that's under construction is totally non-combustible materials. There's no wood in it. It's made out of metal. All the partitions inside are going to be metal. All the doors are metal. So it's a non-combustible structure. If you subtract the hallways from the fire area, one side has 4,282 square feet of fire load, as I would see it, and 5,400 square feet on the other side. Group N occupancies, which is mercantile, is my understanding, they allow up to 5,000 square feet, so we're right in that neighborhood of what they allow for retail, like a retail furniture place. There's no ignition sources in this building. We don't have electricity in the units. It's just lighting and heating and air conditioning. That's it. I think, one of the options I looked at is we could divide it up into 2,500 square feet partitions, and that is a more economical solution than putting a fire suppression system in there. But I don't believe that's safer for the patrons. I don't believe that's safer for the fire department, because now you're inside the building, you're going through doors, and you're in another container. You can't walk into the facility and see what's going on. I don't know, if you should have that in your packet, that alternate design where it shows all the different compartments. I also think that fire sprinkler systems potentially, from my research, have a higher tendency to cause property damage than an actual fire on a more frequent basis, just because pipes freeze. In this facility, it's only maintained at 45 to 88 degrees, so in the wintertime I have a very low cushion. If the thing stops working and we're not aware of that, the pipes could freeze, and then you unleash a 6-inch water pipe into that building to when somebody finds it. Leaks in the system, vandalism, these are all reasons why I like your consideration to keep the current amendment to 7,500 square feet or less. Does not require a fire suppression system. So I'd stand for questions if you have any of me. But
Are there any questions?
Okay.
I'll let city staff go before
Okay.
I have any questions.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Augustine. And the addition to the packet that you should each have in front of you is a summary of what I'm going to go over at the moment. If you want to follow, it's beginning on page 1. Should be 5 numbered pages, and it won't take that long to get through all 5. But I'll note that section 903.2.9, condition 5, that condition which limits the fire area or actually the area of a group S1 occupancy, rather, to 2,500 square feet before the sprinkler requirement kicks in. That was new in the 2012 code, and it generated a lot of discussion. It is still generating discussion, actually, even into 2018, 2021 code reviews. And so in 2014, IFC interpretation 20-14 was issued in order to help guide some of the discussion and to clarify the intent and the scope of the code language for this condition. And the interpretation made it very clear that even a single piece of upholstered furniture or a single mattress would in fact trigger the fire suppression requirement for any S1 occupancy where these might occur that was greater than 2,500 square feet in area. And so obviously it impacts self-service storage units very significantly. Under the current code, the only way for owners not to have to install fire suppression would be to separate fire areas per IBC Section 706 with 3-hour fire resistance rated firewalls, in effect creating separate buildings in each of the areas so that the 2,500 square foot threshold would not be exceeded. Mr. Augustine's observation that mercantile occupancies have a 5,000 square foot threshold before sprinklers are required is absolutely accurate, and city staff would assert in that line of thinking that the 5,000 square feet threshold would be for non-compact storage or display of merchandise on a retail floor as opposed to storage. And so ultimately, in the opinion of staff, that point ultimately is not terribly convincing towards granting or towards BAB's consideration of a variance. Second point that Mr. Augustine had was the exceptionally low incidence of upholstered furniture and mattresses, and I'm sure that's correct, but also could be wildly variable, could be hard to measure and manage, and so in general, city staff, and when I say city staff, I mean the fire marshal, Joe Kovacic, and I, we've talked about this at length with Mr. Augustine, and we are not in favor of restricting contractually, the storage of upholstered furniture or mattresses, because it brings in additional enforcement challenges, not only for us, but also for Mr. Augustine. However, finally, Mr. Augustine's proposal that the BAB recommend and ultimately the City Commission amend Section 903.2.9, Condition 5, to allow the intent of the currently adopted local amendment, which is found in Section 903.2.9.3. All of these are in your handout for reference. To allow that amendment to govern self-service storage facilities, that's received very favorably. Both the fire marshal and I are in favor of that. In fact, in order to explain, I want to give just a bit of background, because the local amendment came in when the 2012 code family was adopted in the city. And current city staff are of the opinion that the scope of the amendment was intended to cover all S1 occupancies that were going to be self-service storage units. This was meant to be the code that would determine what the regulations were for this particular occupancy. And we also contend, we believe, that Condition 5 was not considered to apply to self-service storage facilities at that time. Here's why. It wasn't too far from the time of the code adoption that this IFC Interpretation 20-14 was issued, and we don't find anything in notes that it was a part of the discussion. And in fact, this interpretation has generated quite a buzz in building code forums and discussions among designers and plan reviewers. And excuse me, if you look at on page 2, around the middle of the page, you can see the text from the 2012 model codes, and this is text for both the IBC, the building code, and the IFC, the fire code. They're identical for this Chapter 9. So what you see there, we can read that for Group S1 occupancies, an automatic sprinkler system shall be provided throughout all buildings containing an S1 occupancy where one of the following condition exists. Number 1, Group S1 fire area exceeds 12,000 square feet. And then the text amendment to the local Salina code is just below this, and it actually takes that ceiling and it lowers it to 7,500 square feet, and it adds the requirement that screens be installed 18 inches below the level of sprinkler heads, where those are required, to restrict storage above that level. And it gives specifications for that wire mesh screening. Now, we believe that the local amendment downward from 12,000 square feet before the sprinkler or the fire suppression component kicks in, down to 7,500 square feet, was meant to address the same concerns as 903.2.9 Condition 5. And as I mentioned earlier, the IFC interpretation was not a part of the discussion for the consideration of that local amendment, because I'm confident it was thought not to apply. And the subsequent discovery by the fire marshal that IFC Interpretation 2014 existed, that's really the occasion for having to come back to you as the BAB for a potential code amendment. because we had been operating before we were aware of the IFC interpretation as if the 7,500 square foot area threshold was in fact the threshold for self-service storage facilities. And then we came across this IFC interpretation that said, no, actually, where there could be incidences of mattresses or upholstered furniture, that area is actually limited to 2,500 square feet. So with that history, a little bit of contextual information, and background in mind, we have on page 3 some potential board actions after your discussion. Of course, you'll have time for questions. Not only am I here, but also we have Fire Marshal Joe Kovacic available via Zoom if anyone has questions for him. He's listening in now. But we have a list of 4 possible actions. Number 1, the board could take no action, leaving the adopted code and IFC interpretation 20-14 as they are today. Number 2, the board could deny the request for a code amendment, leaving the adopted code and the IFC interpretation 20-14, again, as they are today. Option number 3, you may wish to postpone consideration of the request for code amendment to a specified date and time, providing city staff direction regarding any additional information that's needed for your consideration. And finally, option number 4, you could approve the request for a code amendment to the 2012 IBC and 2012 IFC and provide the proposed amendment language to be taken to the Salina City Commission for their consideration. Now, if you look down at the bottom of page 3, you'll see that staff is recommending option 4, and we have the following proposal for text amendments. I'll read through those just for clarity's sake. Remove condition 5 from 903.2.9 in the 2012 IBC, and that reads, number 5, a group S1 occupancy used for the storage of upholstered furniture or mattresses exceeds 2,500 square feet. And then replace that language with number 5, a group S1 occupancy used for the storage of upholstered furniture or mattresses exceeds 2,500 square feet, exception, group S1 occupancies that are self-service storage units shall meet the requirements of Salina Municipal Code Section 8-1-903.2.9.3. Now, for your reference, that is the existing local amendment that establishes a 7,500 square feet area threshold for the installation of sprinklers. In the same manner, in the 2012 IFC, we propose and recommend removing condition 5 from 903.2.9 in the 2012 IFC, and that reads, number 5, a group S1 occupancy used for the storage of upholstered furniture or mattresses exceeds 2,500 square feet, and replace it with number 5, a group S1 occupancy used for the storage of upholstered furniture or mattresses exceeds 2,500 square feet, exception, group S1 occupancies that are self-service storage units shall meet the requirements of Salina Municipal Code Section 14-3-1-903.2.9.3. And in the same way that the previous local code referenced the local amendment in the building code, this reference points to the same local amendment, worded exactly the same way in the chapter that is the adopted fire code. And so what we would end up with should this recommendation be taken and acted on follows. For the remainder of page 4 and page 5, you can see what sections 903.2.9 of the IBC and also the IFC would look like should you choose to act on staff's recommended actions. So I'll just stand by as you discuss. If you have any questions for me or for Fire Marshal Kovacic or for Mr. Augustine, we'll stand by and be ready to assist.
Does anybody have any questions or comments related to this? Well, somebody's got to ask a question, so I will ask a question. So just to be clear, the city thought that this was resolved with the 2012 amendment to the code, that the intent was to cover self-storage units limited at 5,000, and the paragraph that is in there that refers to upholstered furniture, again, just either missed or thought not to apply, but that amendment was intended just strictly for self-storage units.
Based on our research, yes. In fact, upon the initial reading of Condition 5 in that section of the code, I read that as backstock areas for retail furniture spaces, as furniture storage warehouses, and expected I would find the same in the commentary and interpretations. And in fact, when we got to IFC Interpretation 20-14, we found out no. And in fact, it seems probably half of all people in the trade were as shocked as I was that the incidence of even one piece of upholstered furniture or mattress would kick in that lower threshold of 2,500 square feet in area. And as I mentioned earlier, it's actually being discussed very, very frequently. Currently, it's interesting to note the 2021 IBC, and so presumably the IFC, I haven't checked that, but the text should be the same, makes allowance for the fire area to be sprinkled as opposed to the entire building where the S1 occupancy exists. But that is the only adjustment in subsequent code cycles that I'm aware of. And so really what I see has happened here, put very simply, is we had a local amendment to state very plainly the requirements for self-service storage facilities. And we were utilizing that and only that. And then we had this IFC interpretation, which is a clear statement of the intent of Condition 5, which we thought did not apply to self-service storage facilities, and in fact it does. And so with that knowledge, then when we had the first project brought to us where this condition affects whether we can issue a permit or no, here we are, before you to talk about that unexpected change due to that interpretation, and to ask you for guidance in possible amendment in order to follow the course we were on before with the local amendment, where that local amendment will still, in fact, regulate the self-service storage facilities.
And has this been addressed with the review of the 2018 code?
In the building code, the answer is no. This came up subsequent to the building code review. We're about to begin the review of the 2018 International Fire Code, and we will take that up at that time. And of course, we'll bring this back to the general meeting of the board when we talk about recommending the proposed code books with the proposed local amendments. We will bring that up for discussion in order to consider the same sort of amendment and whether it's appropriate to move forward in the same way in both books in the 18 family.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the fourth proposal that the city's come up with.
I didn't hear the motion, I'm sorry.
I would move that we approve the request for a code amendment to the 2012 IBC and the ICF codes and provide a proposed amendment language to be taken to the City Commission for their consideration.
I'd second that.
It's been moved and second that we accept this application based on item number, or staff recommendation number 4. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
Very good.
All right.
We don't have anybody on there. Okay. All right, Mr. Chair, we don't have anyone from the public or any other further comment that staff is aware of, so I believe we can go ahead and move toward adjournment whenever the board is ready.
I motion we adjourn.
Been moved and seconded, we adjourn this meeting. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?